All right. Okay, we've still got a few more joining, and I'll tell you when. All right, maybe we can go ahead and get started if you want. Oh, there's more.
Welcome. Hi, everyone. If you don't mind, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, so I'm just going to mute everybody, and then feel free if you have questions to put them up in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone. Okay. Welcome. My name is Shayna Billow. I am a knitting teacher and knitwear designer from Northern New Jersey, and I've been doing a lot of lovely designs in the beautiful Zen Yarn Garden yarns. So when Roxanne asked me to come and teach Two Color Brioche to you, everybody tonight, I jumped on the chance. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me. This happens to be the 17th edition of Tutorial Tuesday for Zen Yarn Garden, and it's been a blast. I am so thrilled that this is my first, and I will be here again in 2 weeks teaching increasing and decreasing in brioche, so I hope you'll pop by then. I am here with Suzanne, who also is one of the wonderful knitting instructors and designers for Zen.
I'll be answering questions or helping with keeping an eye on the chat and getting Sheena to answer any questions that you have. So feel free to post those in the chat or raise your hand or something, and we'll make sure to get those or get her paused. So,
wonderful. All right, super. So I'd love to dive right in and get started with the demonstration of Two Color Brioche. For those of you who attended last week's Tutorial Tuesday, you worked on single color brioche. So this is going to be a jumping off point from there. And I'm going to switch over my camera. All right, beautiful. So what I have here is a basic breakdown of the 4 rows in Two Color Brioche that get repeated. So this is my contrast color, my main color, my contrast color, my main color. I tried to be cute and color code it. So I'm calling this the pink, the main color. And then I have blue for the contrast color. All right, so we'll do a quick refresher of what you covered last week, the bark stitch, the brioche knit right here. And I'm going to attach my new color, my contrast color, and start the brioche knit. If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat. I'll demonstrate both in continental and English style brioche knitting. I happen to be a continental knitter, so that's where I'm most comfortable, but I will keep you up to speed. So this is my selvage stitch right here. And I just added the new yarn without tying knots. That's how I add yarn. Then I'm going to do a yarn over slip. Okay, so that's the regular yarn over slip that you learned last week and the brioche knit that you learned last week. So we've got the yarn over slip where we create a couple, the 2 stitches on the needle. And then we have the brioche knit where we are combining a previously made couple into 1 stitch. I have like a silly analogy that this is like matchmaking and then watching a couple get married. Okay, so here I'm matchmaking, a little date here, and then couple gets married.
oh, that's a cute one.
Right? So it's like a helpful, I think, analogy. Anytime you see 2 together, you're going to marry them. And anytime you see someone single, you're going to find them a date.
Oh.
All right. So that's the idea. So this is brioche knit continental style. Let me show you the brioche knit English style. All right? So our yarn comes front for slip one yarn over. So that's our making of a couple. And then this is the marriage of the couple. And here is just my selvage stitch. Now, before I go any further, this was sort of a refresher of what you did last week, a single color brioche where everything is the brioche knit when you're working back and forth in single color with the yarn over slips between them. The difference here is that we need to now work brioche pearls. So you'll see I have knits and pearls alternating on the different rows. And my yarn that I need to use for row 2 is on the opposite side of the work right now. I'm going to do 2 right side rows in a row. I marked my right side row here. So I'm actually going to slide the fabric over, slide the work over to the other side of the needle. So you have to work on a circular needle for this technique when you're doing 2 color brioche. Next week is 2 color brioche in the round. There you don't have to slide the stitches over because you'll always be starting at on the right side. So really you're only repeating 2 rounds there. All right, so this is where it gets a little different from what you learned last week. We're now going to be introducing Brioche Purl. Okay, so here I go. I've got my selvage stitch. And then a Brioche Purl, you're going to purl these 2 stitches together instead of knit them together. So that bit of it is not too tricky. What usually stops people up is the yarn over slip that you have to do between your brioche pearls. For that, well, let's see, let me go Continental first and then I'll switch over to English. For that, I've just purled a stitch, so my yarn should be in the front. I'm going to simply slide that over and then replace my yarn in the front as I do my brioche purl. So my yarn is in front and I slip a stitch and then I work my brioche purl. It's a little more challenging for those of you who are English or American knitters, so let me focus more on that. Basically, your yarn has to start in front for the slip stitch. Then it needs to swing all the way back around to the front of the work so that you can access the purl 2 together, the burp, the brioche purl. So my yarn is already in the front. I'm going to leave it there and do my yarn over slip here and bring my yarn around to the front of the work and then purl the 2 together for the brioche purl, my little marriage. So my yarn is already in the front. When you're doing those brioche knit rows, your yarn is in the back and you bring it to the front. Here it starts off in the front because you just did a purl stitch and then you wrap the yarn around. So there's a slightly different order in which you move your yarn when you're working the Brioche Purl Row for the yarn over slip. There's slightly a different order. Now I'm moving it. Then I purl 2 together. Okay, so yarn over slip, wrap the yarn around, and do your, oh, Allison. And then we have a yarn over slip, and then I think, oh, this is a right side row, so I'll knit my selvage. Okay. So now both of my yarn ends are in this side. So I had a question, I see a question in the chat about whether or not I have any tips for Continental combined knitters. Other than don't, it's especially challenging for brioche. Anytime I've tried it with combination knitters, it's not gone so well. So yeah,
it's because you have to wrap the yarn and then you want it to be, you want the slipped stitch with the yarn over to be the same direction as the other stitch. And so it makes it extra hard.
I suppose when you're doing your yarn over slips, if your stitch is seated incorrectly, you can turn it. But yeah, I've often found that this stitch here is then slanted in the front where you would knit through the front, but your other stitch is through the back. So it makes it especially challenging for the, gotcha. Yeah. So that's what I would, I would, if you can for brioche, wrap, the conventional way. I'll say conventional rather than correct. So here we go. So I have both of my yarns now on this side, and I'm on the wrong side of my work here. My marker is marking my right side. So now you'll notice here I have two wrong side rows coming up. The first one is going to be a contrast color row, and the next one will be a main color row. So you'll notice here for rows 1, 2, 3, 4, I am alternating contrast, main color, contrast. So those are alternating this way. Here, I have two right side rows in a row, two wrong side rows in a row. So it's interesting the way that the patterns work out this way, but this is how it has to happen. And then here it's brioche knit, then brioche purl, brioche knit, and then back to knit. So it's just interesting. Like it seems like there's no rhyme or reason, and nothing kind of latches up in the same order. Like here we're alternating, here it's doubles, and then here it's doubles, but askew from the right side, wrong side. So it's a little, once you get the hang of seeing what you need to be doing, it gets a little easier. And after I get a couple rows in, you'll start to see, it'll be more obvious where your knit stitches are and where your purl stitches are, just like any ribbing or any pattern that you're starting off. So I'm going to purl my one stitch. And then here I'm ready for a brioche purl. So I'm going to go in, work my purl. I'm going to do this actually just all in English style. And then I'm going to, my yarn is in front, so I slip the stitch. And I'm going to wrap the yarn around, my yarn over slip, and purl the two together. And then slip and wrap around, and then purl the two together. So slip, then wrap the yarn around because you need it back to the front for the purl two together for the brioche purl. So you slip first, wrap the yarn around, and then purl the two together. So if you were doing this combination style, your purl would be under this way. I think there might be a way. I'm going to do my last stitch.
If you did your yarn overs backwards too.
Oh yeah, you could do your yarn. You could wrap your yarn over a different way. I'm just trying to think if there's a way to do it, but I think another issue with it is that you have two rows of purl one after another, so that kind of goofs up the usual combination knitting hack of having a knit after a purl where you can then close up any discrepancies. Anyway, but great question. Yeah, and one color brioche is great to start with because those are all Burke's brioche knit. All right, so here we go. And I want to I know we'll be taking a break in just a second. Oh, that should be a purl, so I'll swing the yarn around and purl. Okay, and now the next color that I need is all the way at the other end of the needle. So I'm going to slide the stitches across and start here so that I'm on the wrong side when I do the next row. And this is a Burke row, a brioche knit row. So just for my selvage, I have a purl stitch, but then I'll just get right into it. And I'll show you in a minute, once I really start moving with this, I'll show you what a couple rows ends up looking like after you've done a bit. And then I'll explain a few tricks I have for figuring out where you are in your pattern when you're in the middle of this, so that you don't even need to look at this kind of thing anymore. You can just make sense of it from looking at your piece. Okay. Are there any questions so far?
Maybe while they're thinking of questions, we'll go into our little commercial break here.
Fabulous. You go for it, Suzanne.
Yeah. Hi, so I'm going to show you a couple patterns where you can try out your brioche. Also, we're doing the discount code again. So you'll see here, I'm going to spotlight this for a second. Your discount code is 2Color Brioche. And that will get you 20% off on everything on the website, including what I'm going to show to you here. This pattern is a 2Color Brioche pattern. And this one is in the round. This happens to be one that I designed. And so we're going to cover 2-color brioche in the round next week. And I'm also going to cover syncopated brioche, which is what you see here, where it changes color in the round. So you can see this wave going through this pattern. And then we have another pattern for you here, which I will share. And that is, let's see, sorry. I can do it this way. Give me 1 second here. The other one is a 2-color brioche. This one is not in the round. So this one is more what Shayna is going over right now. And let me share that. Sorry, a little second there. So you can see here the 2-color brioche, but it's only for part of the shawl. So it gives you a little break. So you get to do some brioche and then a little bit of lace open work. So that's a nice, fun one to try out. And it uses the new Nightshade yarn too. It has that in there. So now I will let Shayna go back and show us her tricks and tips.
Thank you, Suzanne. All right, so I did a couple rows while we had our commercial break. So I have a little bit more on the needles now to share with you what's going on here. So whenever I'm working 2-color brioche and I set my work down and I pick it up and I have no clue which row I'm on, I have a few tricks for figuring out where I am. The first one is I look at the colors on the needle and I figure out which one there are a majority of. So 2/3 of the stitches here, so for every 3 stitches, 2 of them are my main color. That would indicate to me that I have just finished a main color row. So I can rule out rows 2 and 4. I'm either doing row 1 or 3 because I'm ready for a blue row because the predominant color on the needle is not blue. So I'm ready for a blue row. All right, so I'm either on 1 or 3. I happen to have marked off my right side row. So that would mean I'm ready for row 1, which is a right side row. Another way to tell is by looking at the stitches themselves. So my contrast color yarn is here. So I know I'd be working a row in this direction. Let's say I didn't know if it was my right side or wrong side. Here, my blue stitches, my contrast color stitches look like knits rather than pearls. So if I'm about to do this row, this would be my Brioche Knit Row because in the contrast color, because I want these knit stitches to present themselves towards me. Rather than if I was looking at this row and let's say my contrast color was over here, that would be my Purl Row, my Brioche Purl Row. I'm happy to explain that again if anyone would like to hear it, but basically process of elimination. Which color did I just work? Am I on a right side or wrong side row? And or do the stitches in the color I need to work look like knits or do they look like pearls? Or, Brioche Purl looks a little slouchy, but the knit stitch is at least quite clear. So does it look like a knit or does it look like the other one? All right, so let's see. So I'm going to do a little bit more of this. Yeah. Okay. So this is a Brioche Knit Row in the blue in the contrasting color. And then I'll do the Brioche Purl Row again. Okay. And especially when you're starting your brioche in 2 colors, I would recommend highly contrasting colors or yarns so that you get a good sense of what your stitches, which columns you're working on and so forth. Oop, brought the tail up. Okay.
We're getting a couple questions in the chat too about that, and just one about 2 variegated, and it can work, but they do have to be contrasting enough to see a difference if you're doing 2 color.
Yeah, I would recommend that too.
One
So-
trick for seeing if things are contrast enough that I like to do is take a picture of the yarns and then change it to black and white. And if you see a difference in black and white, then you know that you'll be able to like see that difference when they're integrated together. If it kind of washes out and it just looks like one gray, then it's not enough contrast.
Yeah, that's a great tip. All right, so I've got my yarn over slip and then burp or brioche purl, purl two together. So we've got your yarn over, or my yarn is in front, I'm slipping a stitch and then wrapping the yarn around it. So creating that little couple, and then here's a brioche purl, the marriage. Yes, oh, so this is thicker than a simple rib. So brioche is a cellular stitch. The structure of our stitches is very different from a regular knit stitch. And I will draw that out for you. Let me just, I'll finish the row. So yes, it does look thicker. It's wider than a regular rib stitch, and I'll show you both sides of it. This is reversible. So on this side here, I had started with single color brioche just to kind of give a base here. And then I started the 2-color brioche patterning here. And so on this side, my blue stitch is the predominant color. And on this side, my variegated yarn is the predominant color, but it's the same stitch. Like if you look at this solid color, or the single color, I should say, it's not solid. You can see that it is reversible. Like it's the same on both sides. So it's very similar to a 1x1 rib in that way, with the exception that when you're doing the 2-color brioche, one side has the knit stitch, let's say, in one color, and the other side has the knit stitch in the other color. So that would be one of the differences between this and a rib. So typically, if this is a row of knitting, each of these is a little stitch, right? Okay. The next row of knitting sits in this way. This is typical knitting. Each of these are regular stitches. With brioche, what we're doing is we're flattening every other stitch on every other row. We're alternating. So instead of the row looking like this loop-de-loop, our row ends up looking, sorry, let me get that. We have an extra long stitch and then sort of a flat short stitch. And then this reaches up to here and these two get combined. And then this is more of a flat stitch. And then these two come up here and this is more of a flat that would hook right into here. I didn't plan that out so well, but I hope you're getting the idea. So
yeah, that's a great visual there.
I've done better, but anyway, so basically you get a flat with a loop and then the flat here. So they alternate a little bit. They don't sit exactly neat like this, but you can see when this happens, basically you've got a condensed fabric. So for every 3 rows here, or every 4 rows here, it's equivalent to 8 rows in this. So regular knitting, the stitches are taller. Here they are shorter and wider. So you need less stitches to cast on for a project. If you were, say you wanted to make a scarf in this, in brioche and in 1x1 rib, you'd need more stitches for 1x1 rib than you would in brioche. Even if you were on the same needles, same yarn, you'd need fewer stitches in brioche because they're so much wider, but you would be knitting extra rows in brioche than you would be for the regular rib stitch, just because of the structure. So the stitches are not, they have this interesting connection here. There's that flat stitch that I was attempting to draw out, but there it is right there, that flattened stitch rather than the perky continual stitches like that. Hope that, I'm sure I over answered that question, but if you have
no, I think that was great.
Thank you. So here, I forgot where I was. I see mostly my pink stitches, my multicolor stitches on the needle. That tells me I'm ready for a blue row. And I'm holding the blue yarn at the beginning of the needle and I'm seeing not knit stitches. So this is my Brioche Purl in blue row. So I will just do a little bit more of that. I purl a little bit different. I'm a continental knitter, but my purl is a bit of a Norwegian vibe, so it's a little different. If you are a continental knitter, I highly suggest instead of doing anything big and major with your yarn over slip, I would just put my needle behind the working yarn and slip the stitch over like that. And you have much less movement that you need to do. So my needle just comes behind, scoops for my yarn over slip, and then I do my burk. So I find continental knitting quite handy for brioche knitting for those yarn over slips. And let me switch over to English knitting again. So my yarn is in the front. I slip the stitch over, swing the yarn around, and then purl the two together. Basically, for any brioche, I think the trickiest piece that people have with this is making sure all the yarn over slips actually get their mate. So you'll notice when I come here to the end of the row, yarn over slip, purl two together. Here I have a final yarn over slip. So I have my yarn over slip. Let's say now I was ready to knit the last stitch. I could just knit it from here. If I needed to purl it but didn't bring my yarn a full circle around, I then wouldn't end up with my slipped stitch here. So you just have to make sure that you've always prepped your yarn to be in position for whatever the next stitch is. So prior to a yarn over slip, your yarn comes to the front, you slip the stitch, and then you wrap the yarn around, thinking ahead to whatever your next stitch is supposed to be, so that you can make sure to lock in that partner, that yarn over to the slip stitch. So Christine asks, does brioche take more yarn? Suzanne, I don't know if you have a more definitive answer, but it's interesting. It uses less stitches, but takes more rows. So probably it might even out to be similar.
Yeah, it also, it makes a thicker fabric. So, I guess if you think about it that way, then it's thicker. So
Yeah,
it would
you're
take
right.
up more yarn per, distance that you're getting. But
yeah, perhaps for every square inch or something. That would be a fun thing to work out. I know with crochet, it takes about 30% more yarn than knitting for a similar project.
And you're also getting like a kind of a thicker fabric with crochet, right? Then.
Yeah. But I don't know if there's a formula for the brioche, but that would be a good thing to look into. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple minutes left. I'd love to answer any other questions. I don't know if anyone wants to take a screenshot of this. I will put this up on my Instagram and I will tag you, Zen Yarn Garden.
And we also record these, so you can get the recording and watch this again for refresher. And
excellent. All right, so I'll just pop over so you can see my face. So how's everyone doing with that? I know it was a quick tutorial. Did anything resonate with anybody? Did you feel like that got you on the right track for brioche, that it's a little less scary now? I'd love to hear your thoughts, or if you have any questions for me.
I think it was really good, Shayna. I love how you drew the diagram out. I think that really helps, at least for me.
The difference.
So I think it helps people visualize things.
That's kind. Again, not mine. Thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, good, Mariana. Great. I'm glad that was helpful to figure out what row that you're on. It's a big deal because there are 4 options, right? So if you can start to use that process of elimination to figure out which row you're at, it just makes the process a little easier. I know it can be so challenging to put a project down and then pick it up later and have no clue where you are. I had one sweater like that, and it ended up being ripped out because I just could not figure out. It was one of these patterns in another language that I just didn't. Anyway, long story short, hopefully that won't happen for you.
Yeah. Also, we are going to go over fixing mistakes, and as much as possible with brioche, it's a little difficult, but that'll be in a subsequent.
Absolutely, yeah.
Time.
It has to do with the structure. Yeah, the structure of the stitches makes mistakes a little different, but yeah. Oh, so Sue, do I recommend Lifelines? Absolutely. Yeah, Lifelines are great for this. And yeah, there are many ways to rip brioche, but Lifelines are probably the safest and easiest.
Yes.
So, thank you, Carol. I saw your comment here. Oh, and then Britta was saying, okay. Yeah, you felt
more yarn.
Yeah, that Britta. Oh, so with those Stephen West patterns, I'm not sure that he accounts No offense to Stephen West. I'm not sure he accounts for the, I've noticed in the ones that I've helped my students with, like if there are 100 stitches on the needle for garter stitch, that number isn't changed for the brioche. So in essence, the brioche doesn't have anywhere to go but up. So that's why it took a little bit more yarn, because the stitches are that much wider, they're eating up more yarn. And it's the same number of stitches as your garter stitch. So yes, the stitches are loftier and fluffier, so it is taking up more yarn.
Kind of stretched, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Susan asks, where are these recordings going to be? Do you know, Suzanne?
Yeah. Well, we do send them out in the emails, so you probably are on the email list if you were able to sign up for this Zoom. We also, and here, thanks, Roxanne, just stuck that in there for us, so that's great. So you can click on this link here in the chat and get to the recordings. Then you can go back to like the one color brioche or, you know, anything too along the way, which is nice. And we do post them on Facebook, I think also. If you, you know, follow Zen Yarn Garden on Facebook, you should be able to find them there.
Fabulous. And I will say, so this is a really broken down version, very simple of what the pattern would be, just telling you basically what color you're using, type of row you're on, and whether you're working a brioche knit or a brioche purl. What I would do is just put on an even number of stitches, and every row would start with an either a brioche knit or a brioche purl after your selvage stitch with an even number of stitches. But once you get that hang of, oh, here's a couple, let me do the brioche purl or knit to them, and here's a single, let me give it a yarn over slip, any number of stitches works. Like once you see it, it really clicks. So hoping that helps. And then Carol asked, how does brioche work for cotton or linen? Beautifully. Yeah, there's no reason not to. Linen is always so beautiful. And I think it would look great with brioche. I think you could certainly, there's no reason not to, other than the fact, like Suzanne was saying, like it does get a little heavier, the fabric, it's a little loftier. But yeah, you certainly could make like a brioche cotton sweater, like a long sleeve sweater for fall would be lovely. In fact, a lot of the ready to wear designers do that. Like when you go to a regular department store, you'll see a lot of brioche knits there, and often they're in cottons and cotton blends. So I think you're on the right track there. Yeah. Awesome. So we hope you'll join us next week for 2 color brioche in the round, and then I'll be back with you the following week for some basic increases and decreases. Don't forget, you can save 20% at zenyarngarden.com with the code 2colorbrioche. And this was a blast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shayna. That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you all.